Yet another new manager facing the consequences of their actions story.
I'll keep the details as vague as possible because I'm still with this organization. I work for a government department. We have offices and locations all over the state. I'm based out of a city that's about a 2-and-a-bit-hour train ride to our head office. At the time I was working in a team that had members working remotely all across the state, looking after policy, process, and quality assurance. Our old manager had gone and gotten himself promoted for being genuinely brilliant at his role. So our new manager, Steve, was hired in from the glorious world of banking, and he was here to whip us lazy public servants into shape. A few days after he began his role, he called us all to a teleconference to inform us he wanted all of us to be at the head office 8 a.m. tomorrow morning for an all-day in-person team meeting. He wanted to see us in meet space, to size us up, understand what we were doing, and see where we weren't keeping up with the private sector. As I mentioned, due to the nature of the work we were doing, we were all across the state. So in person, whole team meetings were rare, and if they occurred at all, they were booked weeks in advance. We were all adept at video conferencing long before COVID. Some of us tried to tell our new high-flyer manager that almost none of us were in the same city as him, and to be there on such short notice would mean travel expenses, meal allowances, overtime etc. He didn't seem to care, and told us in no uncertain terms to just be at head office tomorrow at 8 a.m. before abruptly hanging up.
Now, I should explain something. I'm one of a handful of union delegates in our department. I know our ward back to front, specifically the sections dealing with travel, allowances, and overtime. So I engaged malicious compliance mode. If Steve wanted us there, fine, but it'll cost him. So I quickly went about emailing my team what Steve had done by requiring us to be in the head office at 8 a.m. and what to do. Because we'd have to travel outside our normal work hours, our workday clock started ticking the moment we left our homes and only stopped once we got home. Some of our team traveled overnight. They were entitled to overtime to travel, a dinner allowance, and accommodation for the night, and the same returning.
As someone traveling in the morning before 7 a.m., I was entitled to a breakfast allowance, lunch allowance, and if I got home after 9 p.m., a dinner allowance also. So, I left my house at 5 a.m. to catch the only train that would get me there in time. The train was running slightly behind, but I made it in time. So my first 3 hours of my workday down and I'd done no work. After a brief period of us introducing ourselves to Steve, he proceeded to spend the next 4 hours telling us about all of the things he did at the bank. How he made so much money for them. Where they'd sent him as a holiday bonus. How we're all stuck in the past in the public service. The work he'd seen wasn't up to private sector standards, etc. He had all the cocksureness of a finance bro who had always failed upwards because others had picked up his slack. By 3 p.m. my entire team were into overtime pay territory. And Steve was just warming up with his non-charm offensive. Another 3 hours go by with Steve verbally patting himself on his back. Deeply in love hearing his own voice. But all I hear is, cha-ching cha-ching. Steve decided that 5 p.m. was a good time to finish up. He stopped mid-sentence, looked at his watch, and unceremoniously said, "That's all for today. Go home now," and walked out. After I and a few other gave a few awkward shrugs to each other. We all packed up and started to make our separate ways home after doing no work all day. I, myself got to the train station pretty quickly, and saw a train was leaving soon that would get me home around 8 p.m. Or I could catch the all stations train and get home closer to 9:30 p.m. You know what? No matter how fast I could run, I just couldn't catch that earlier train. Damn, I'd just have to catch that all stations train and be on the clock for another hour and a half. Plus have my dinner paid for. Such rotten luck. I submitted my claims the next day. 4.5 hours at double rate. My train tickets. My taxi fares to and from the train station. My breakfast, lunch, and dinner allowances. For me alone it was close to a $500 expense claim. The rest of my team followed suit, and ensured they claimed everything too. Steve tried to fight us on approval for the claims, but quickly learned that unlike in the world of banking, most public servants are union, and we'd raise living hell if he denied our award guaranteed allowances. His all-day Steve Fest symposium blew a good $6,000 hole in his budget. Needless to say, while Steve was our manager, he never required us to attend an in-person meeting again. Video conferencing was just fine. He only lasted 6 months before leaving for new opportunities. He just went back to his old job at the bank. Guess he was the one who couldn't keep up.
I hate I love me, I'm so successful speeches with a passion.
I had a manager once who I didn't like, but he did teach me a valuable lesson. If you come into an organization in a leadership role, do nothing but learn for the first 3,045 days.
Was Steve from out of state by any chance? If he wasn't, that's even worse because he should have known. I had one of these once. A new manager who I met for the first time during an in-person sexual harassment meeting that was being conducted by HR. When the meeting was over, she was telling everyone to clock out and saying we got paid for an hour and 15 minutes for that meeting. I said to her, I know you're from other state, where the labor laws are different. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew. In this state, if someone is scheduled, you have to pay them for a minimum of 2 hours. She said, oh, I'm not sure. Let me ask. Then she called over the HR guy who had been conducting the meeting and told him I had a question. I said, no, I don't have a question. I'm not asking you. I'm telling you. This is the law in this state. HR guy came over and told her that he didn't know if I was right or not, because he also was from out of state.
I told her that she could look it up if she didn't believe me, but please look it up. I was just trying to help her, because we don't need a class action suit from employees who would rightfully be claiming wage theft, all because she wasn't taking time to learn the ropes before she jumped in.
What amazes me is that people think government can be profitable. It's a service. Service costs money. I've always had a slightly macabre fascination of bullies getting their comeuppance. Having been bullied myself, seems like the manager tucked his tail between his legs and scurried off pretty quickly.
Beautiful.
Did you play buzzword bingo?
Aren't unions the best? I think anyone who uses the term meat space, other than retelling or commenting on this story, should be put on an ice floe and pushed out into the bay. I know our award back to front. Straya? What are award and penalty rates? I left when I was a kid, so I've never worked there. But you never know. I might go back someday. It sounds a lot like Steve wasn't up to public sector standards. Steve's biggest mistake was not understanding the climate of your department, and prejudging everyone as knowing nothing. Arrogance is the reason some leaders aren't adaptable. But as long as Steve stays in his lane at the private company that allows him to blame his shortcomings on employees, he'll prosper in ignorance. Very cool. It must be a dream to have a unionized job. Good work. Wow, Steve was publicly served his ass on a platter. I am curious. Why is it called an award? I always understood it to be called a contract. But that's in the US. Is it just different terminology? Genuinely curious. Idiots rise and fall to the level of their incompetency. I wonder how much crow Steve had to eat to get his old job back. Or even if it was his old job, there's a good possibility that he was gently ushered out and had to take a lower position to get back in. Reminds me of a firefighter TV show a while back. First episode, the main character shows up at I guess the first day on the job for a bunch of new firefighters or some such. Talks about himself at length and leaves. I never watched a second episode. Fuck Steve. I loved reading that one.
Beautiful.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Ericast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.